Hello and welcome to another edition of the Sunday Huddle. As always, joined with Bryan and Nathan. And as always, sponsored by Sports World and Brotherwood Coffee. There's a link in the bio. We'd love for you to buy some coffee, help support what we are doing. Again, we're grateful for you, grateful that you're watching this episode, and we want to tell you how grateful we are.
Yeah, we'd also love to connect with you and give you some free stuff. Sports World has hooked us up with some Sports World swag. Said it right that time. Sports World swag. And we want to get it in the hands of you. So you can click the link down in the description or in the bio there, depending on where you're watching or listening, and give us a little bit of information, and you might be one of the winners of some free Sports World stuff. And we also would love for you to leave us a review while you're at it. If you're listening on Apple Podcast or on Spotify, then you can leave us a 5-star review. That makes a really big difference as we try to reach more people. Also, I was looking at the wrong camera for that entire time. I was looking up there at the three of us, so when they cut to me, I'm going to be looking off to the side.
That's going to be
amazing.
It's going to be amazing. But
so what's wrong with him?
No, nothing's wrong with him. You know, when we do want you to like, we want you to subscribe, and also leave a comment. We read all of our comments. We love to read our comments. We want to engage with some of our comments as we've been able to do. And in fact, even some of this back and forth that we've had, we want to maybe help us to guide for future episodes where we engage with people. Even if you agree with us, disagree with us, we're okay. We're okay with that. It doesn't hurt our feelings too bad when people disagree with us.
I cry.
Yep.
I sob all the time.
He does. He does sob.
Buckets.
He does sob all the time.
Drums of tears. Just in case you weren't sure of how big amount of tears there
That's
are.
usually my first question when someone says they're crying. What amount? What amount of the tears?
That's what I'm saying. Of biblical proportions.
That's what matters. He is such a weird guy.
This is
weirdo,
true.
man.
Speaking
we
of weird,
love him. He's our weirdo, but we love him.
Speaking of weird, so I was on my way to the square randomly, and on the way, I noticed this billboard, and I'm sure it's been there forever, but I wasn't paying attention, and it's the Mint Dentistry sign. Okay, yeah. So there's this dude smiling on it, and it says, "We make sexy teeth." And I've never seen that, and I'm just curious, what is sexy teeth, and why are we looking for sexy teeth?
I have no idea. And I want to do all sorts of jokes that you grew up in Oklahoma. I didn't know what a dentist was. There's all sorts of things to alienate our Oklahoma audience immediately is what I'm trying to do.
All two of them.
But that's what you said, and I didn't believe it. You know, I don't have any idea why we'd want that. Do you?
No, that's just crazy to me.
What does that qualify?
What did the teeth look like in the billboard? I feel like that's your answer right there.
I wasn't paying attention. I was still just lost it. I was still perplexed, and I can't, walk and chew gum at the same time.
Why did you say the word perplexed like you just learned it? The way I was still perplexed.
Okay, so
listen to this one, guys.
It's because of AI perplexity. That's why. That's right. That's a real word. Like
polysyllabic, and he was so proud of himself.
So I like big words. No, but that's crazy to me that everything in our culture is being sexualized right now.
Oh, yeah. There is zero doubt that that's taking place. And, we were talking a little bit about last week. So we're kind of going to do a series here. We started last week on the 7 deadly sins. And we're going to talk today about just that. That's not something that's just affecting this culture, but obviously has affected cultures in the past.
Dentistry.
Right? I think evidently it has in Denton, Texas, that it's affected dentistry and lust. We're going to talk about that, how everything's been sexualized. So first of all, and I was thinking about this too, because lust, most of all in the biblical references, it has obviously to do with sexual attraction and aimed at the wrong thing and in the wrong way. But it's broader than that, right? It doesn't have to be just that. Wouldn't you say that?
I would agree. We actually did that in the youth. A couple of, I don't remember time.
Dentistry?
Nope.
Okay.
We did not. We did not practice.
Brush your teeth, kids.
Yeah. As we sing the song.
Yeah, that's good. Okay.
But that was one of the discussions that we had in there, is how lust wasn't limited to just, even though that is what I would say most of it is, but yes, it is broader than that.
Yeah. You?
Yeah, and I think the reason we focus on a lot of times on like the kind of sexual desire side of that being tied to that is because of how destructive that side of it is. I mean, lust in general, obviously, as we'll get into, is sinful and unhealthy and not great, but the destructiveness of that side of it.
And as I said at the last episode, and we real quick as a clarifier, for the sake of clarity, we don't have a list of and labeled something called the 7 deadly sins in the Bible. We talked about it a little bit. There's a little bit of a history around this. Actually started off as 8 and then pivoted and moved to 7 in some of the church history. But we're just talking this just as an interesting way to address it. But we don't think that there's anything biblical about these 7 deadly sins being worse than others or better than others or is referenced in particular set like that.
Well, debatable though, because 1 Corinthians 6:18 says, "Flee from sexual immorality. Every other sin a person commits is outside the body, but the sexually immoral person sins against his own body."
So now we're going to talk about the weights of sin, which is an interesting topic, and that's an interesting subject. Before we probably even get to this one, are there different sins that have different weights, and how do we address that? The Bible seems to say that, right? It seems to say that there's a different thing to this because it's experienced in a different way,
right?
In a way that's more damning and more damaging,
right?
Yeah. So how would you address that?
Well, I like to cherry pick verses.
I know.
Sounds about right.
It does sound about right. That whole thing where you win the NBA kick and I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I remember you did that. You're like, hey, I'm going to be the.
It was so true. I got like 3 feet of air that time.
Not so much, but yes, that's right. You do cherry pick verses. Yeah. And thoughts on the verse you brought up?
Yeah, I think someone is listening, and as you're saying that, and they're saying to themselves, with repeating what they've heard forever, is no. All sin is equal in God's eyes, and our response to that would be, well. Yes, in that all sin is equal and that it separates us from God. Right. All sin carries the punishment of death, whether it be what we would see as a big sin or a small sin. But not all sin has equal levels of fallout and consequence here in this life, for sure. We would say that, right? If I were to, if I make fun of Bryan's clothes or something.
That's too easy, but yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
If I make fun of Bryan's clothes, the consequence for that is going to be far different than if I go and attack Bryan, obviously.
Right.
Yeah, because you don't want to mess with these guns.
There's something. There's arms. You have 2 of them. But here's the thing. The thing is that there are different weights, so that verse can't meet that. And so then we have something that's actually, it seems contradictory. It's not. But Jesus said, oh, wait a minute. There were these people that thought they were really righteous. Right. And they said, we've kept the law and we've done this. And Jesus said, oh, no. If you've been angry with your brother, it's the same as murder. If you've looked at a woman the wrong way, the topic we're talking about today, if you've looked at a woman the wrong way, it's the equivalent of adultery. Right. So this that was just even in our minds, even in our brains. Jesus didn't just teach the laws, he actually amplified its precepts. But as Nathan has pointed out, there are greater repercussions to someone engaging in the sin and thinking about the sin. In the eyes of God, all sin is the same, right? In that it separates us from Him. But how would you exegete that passage? How would you treat that words?
I would agree with what both of y'all are saying. Yes, it is. All sin is equal before God in that it separates us from Him. But David was a man after God's own heart, and we saw what lust did as it careened his life into disaster. Yeah. Which also led to another one in murder of Uriah. So it's one of the things about lust, especially in today's culture, is that we confuse love, lust, and our own desire for pleasure and comfort as the right thing to do. And so I would have to agree that it. I guess I answered the question and then I'm now passing. No,
but I'll point this to both of you. But that's exactly true. But what you hit on there is that we have this desire, and this desire seems natural. Right. So when does it move from natural to sinful? And that's what lust would qualify, right? That there's a different level. There's a different thing that's taking place here. Number one, it's not aimed at the right thing, but it also not as an aimed at the right thing, but it's in the wrong amount. It's inordinate. Right. It's not in line with what God would have us to do, right?
And one of the reasons that we see David's a good example, obviously, like the go-to for a lot of people with like lust and seeing the like extreme fallout of what can happen, not in only his life, but also the life of others. Right. And I think that's part of the reason why we would talk about and think of lust as so destructive and why there's such harsh and seeming like direct verbiage used in the Bible is because it doesn't just impact us usually. Most sin impacts others around us too, but lust, man, especially, usually there's another side to that, another party that it is harming in some way. Right.
These sins are not, and we've talked about this, I think, in previous episodes, but this sin is not in isolation. It's not something that occurs in a vacuum and doesn't impact others. And David is the great example of that. Lost his child as the result of his sin, committed murder, committed murder, did that which was wrong. And nevertheless, this is a man who's after God's own heart. So God's forgiveness is offered to him. But the repercussions for lust, the repercussions for this sexual sin were great.
Right. Well, then take it even further because his oldest son did the same thing and raped his daughter. Yeah. And then led to the kingdom having another again when Absalom becomes king, and then also has debauchery on top of the temple in front of everybody. It's not just one sin; it keeps going, and so it's crazy that type of example can lead to. I mean, again, it's a sexual sin where even what is it? Troy. That's the Iliad. Yeah, the Iliad. That's when the woman, Helen of Troy, face who could launch 1,000 ships, has this big war whenever she's taken. And we can look at not only biblically, but even in historical fiction of, well, this is something that causes a lot of leaders to fall. From
the most inappropriate comments to the Battle of Troy. Yeah. that is the paradox that is Bryan Hasley. Well done, sir. Well done, sir.
Didn't think of that. Yeah, that's true.
You were so good.
I don't know what's going on in here.
Yeah, you do. It's great. So what does the Bible say about this? So Bible says that this comes from this idea, for everything in the world, this is 1 John 2:16, for everything in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life comes not from the Father, but from the world. Mm-hmm. And just as you started off with on the dentistry, this world has a message, right? And this message is that this is something that, if it's natural, indeed it is to be pursued. God's word would give different warnings for that.
Absolutely. So I think, Jeff, you mentioned, obviously lust becoming sinful. For the person that's listening and would say, well, like God clearly, when we think about lust in the terms of like sexual desire and stuff, like God clearly put that in us, right? That God is the creator, the designer of sex, and it's a good thing in the confines of the way that He says. So if God put that desire in me, then how is that sinful to like look at someone of the opposite sex in that way?
I'll let you take that, Bryan.
I enjoy it.
Bryan usually asks those questions.
Are you going to any sort of Greek medieval?
Oh, no, I'm going to say, I enjoy a sunset, so I'm kidding. No, I'm going to quote Billy Graham, who said that I can't control, and I'm paraphrasing, I can't control if a bird flies over my head, but I don't have to let it nest in my hair. And so I think that with the desires that we have, we obviously know that there's something with them that is not God-honoring, specifically when the Bible wants us to become one flesh with our wife. And so I think that there's a reason that the Bible also teaches us multiple times to flee from it. Yeah. It doesn't say like, oh, let me manage this, or oh, let me have these apps on my phone that I'm not Twitter or X is blocked on my phone. It's not because I'm like, oh, I'm great. It's actually the opposite. I'm incredibly weak. So I would say, like, how do we address that? It's we know that it's wrong, and you know this because of the safeguards you have to set in place to prevent yourself from doing it.
So I want to talk about that in just a second, about how do we avoid this sin? How do we avoid the sin? Because if it's grave consequences, and that's what takes place. And so it's important that we know exactly how we do that. But again, it's kind of what our last episode we talked about, the first sin, and we talked about the 7 deadly sins of gluttony. So God made us to eat food. Right. And so if we eat food, what's wrong with us eating food? Just an inordinate amount? Well, first of all, it's you're not just eating to consume for just the taste, or just to sustain your body, but you're doing it in the wrong way. And so the Bible says that God gives confines for this natural desire, and it's between a male and a female, and in the confines of marriage. And this is the place where that is appropriate. But if not, once it gets outside of those boundaries, these guardrails that seem to be in place, and they seem to limit us sometimes. But these limitations are not limitations at all. They're actually guardrails that keep us from kind of running off of a cliff.
Right. Yeah. And it brings us to a place. Where I am now being just ruled by my desires, and like you said, no guardrails, no limitations. Like that's now the driving force behind like my decisions and what I do with my life is my own desires. Yeah.
And I think especially as a youth pastor, this has got to be something. And we talk about young men. And Every Young Man's Battle, great book that talks a little bit about this. But there are certain things that we have to do. And so how do we, and that's kind of I wanted to kind of the last minutes that we have here, if it's okay with you guys, how do we overcome this sin? It's something that it's a temptation that falls all men. That the enemy is going to come for us, guys. We always say gold, glory, and girls, right? Yep. It's going to be possessions. It's going to be exalted so that you can be put on a high place, or it's going to be chasing after those that you shouldn't in the wrong way that contradicts God's word. How do we avoid those sins? Quit looking at my notes.
I'm surprised you can see them without big reading glasses. So that's
good,
impressive.
Yep.
No, I obviously safeguard on your phone. They have covenant eyes. We've talked about community and the importance of accountability in that, because I'm confessing those things whenever they happen, because then there's I've got brothers that are supporting me and walking me with these kind of situations. I know that as younger, like, man, I'm going to look at these things now, but when I'm married, I'm totally not, because I'm going to be able to engage in intercourse all the time that I want. Every time I just think about it. And false, that doesn't happen. But when you're training your body at an earlier age to look at these, you're training yourself to not be satisfied with one woman. And so that's why we have to set up all these safeguards. That's why we have to make sure that we are not playing with fire, that we are truly like fleeing from it. With some of the youth using an example is, well, it's my girlfriend. Yeah, that's cool. You probably shouldn't be at home late at night watching movies in a horizontal position.
Right.
That's not setting yourself up for success. That's definitely not fleeing from sin.
Yeah. So Nathan, one of your young people comes up to you and he says, hey, listen, I'm struggling with this. I'm struggling with lust. What would be, man, you say, I'm going to give you the 5-minute advice on, hey, man, here's what you need to do.
Yeah. The first thing, I think the very first step is recognizing that it's a battle of the mind, that we're battling the mind. And it's not just I'm removing one thing, like I'm just going to stop doing something. It's then turn our attention to something else. So like with my toddler, if he has something he's not supposed to have in his hand, if I'm going to go and just pull it out of his hand, he's going to lose his mind. But if I go take it out of his hand and I want to replace it with something now, here, I'm going to give you something else now to take your attention off of that thing. And it usually softens the blow a little bit. So not a perfect analogy because that could fall apart.
No, but I think that's actually a great analogy. Yeah.
But it's not just removing, but it's also replacing. So like it's not just looking away from something, but it's looking to something. So we need to take our eyes not just off of like lustful things that we're looking at, but turn them to Jesus.
Right.
And ultimately, if we don't do that, then all the other safeguards, you mentioned like covenant eyes and not having Twitter on your phone, all that stuff, well, those don't matter because you're losing the battle if you're not then turning your eyes to Jesus.
Right. That's actually a great analogy. And often we've talked about this even like addiction and stuff like this. You overcome addiction not by saying you're not going to do something, but pursuing that which is good.
Exactly.
So you can replace that which could harm your toddler and you replace it with something good and his attention is rightly oriented.
Right.
And so that's what I had first thing. We got to train our eyes and we have to redirect our heart. We have to pursue that which is good and that which is and avoid that which is not good. And the last thing I had is that, and I think you mentioned it earlier, we have to flee from sin. So I love the story of Joseph in the Old Testament, right? And we all know the story. And so Potiphar's wife, Mrs. Potiphar, comes and she hits on him. He doesn't say, hey, let's pray about this and think whether this is the right thing to do.
Right.
Let's pray about that. Hey, I don't know for sure if this, but instead what he does, he doesn't argue with her, he doesn't debate with her, but instead what he does, he actually flees. He actually runs. And man, if we would do it that way, first thing we need to do is redirect our eyes to the right things, to pursue Christ with all of our hearts. And in doing so, we automatically move away from that bad. But then what we do is we often, we need to then avoid things that could get us in trouble. I always use this as an analogy when I talk to young people that are struggling with certain sins. They always want to see in a pickup truck how far they can sit on the back of the tailgate of the truck before they fall out.
Right.
Right. Well, hey, what about this? They're going to give you all levels of when does it become something that's wrong, right?
Yep.
What about this? What about this? And they want to see how far they can get to the end of it before they make a mistake. And man, that's not the way we flee from sin. That's not the way we walk by the Spirit and not gratify the desires of the flesh.
Right, absolutely. And Psalm 119:9 teaches us, how can a young man keep his way pure? By guarding it according to your word. With my whole heart I seek you. Let me not wander from your commandments. I've stored up your word in my heart that I might not sin against you. Like, we have to make sure that we're constantly in the word, that we are, again, cleaving to the things that are so much better than us. Because it's not going to be on our power that we're able to escape it.
And it's this active guard. We're actively watching. It's not something that just kind of goes by us and passes by us. I have one of my best friends in high school, Heath Halodnik. How's that for a great name? I don't know if I've shared before, but I worked as a glamorous job as this summer. Only other job I had was at a city pool, right? And I worked at a city pool, and such.
We're on a lust episode. Let's not get those visuals. Sorry.
So my buddy Heath and I don't know if I've shared this. The people in the pool. You have to scan the water, and you have to scan back and forth and right and left. And if somebody, the dead man float where you're laying down, right, and you got to keep your eyes on them. You got to watch them. You got to keep your eyes on it all the time. But what happens is that if you lose your diligent eyes, and just for a second. That's all it takes, just for a second, right. And then something tragic happens, and that happens. Maybe we have to actively pursue that which is good.
Yeah, I have a couple more practical things. I didn't give them a full answer with the students. What I would share, one for me is also helping just have a healthy view of just temptation in general, is like what it looks like to avoid it. I've heard this. I've shared it with our students a million times, and it really has helped me in my life. is a story of there's a guy walking down the street, and he falls into a hole. So he climbs himself out and dusts himself off and keeps going. So the next day he's thinking, man, I know that hole is there. So he decides, you know what, I'm gonna jump over it this time. So he runs, tries to jump over it, falls in the hole. Gets up, dusts himself off. Then the next day he thinks, well, no, there's some room along the side of the street. If I just scooch along this, I'll be good. So he does that, falls in the hole, and gets up, dusts himself off. And the next day he decides, you know what, I'm gonna take a different street tomorrow. I'm not gonna walk down that street anymore because I know the hole is there, so I'm gonna avoid it altogether. So when we think about temptation, is not just yes, we want to, like, there's gonna be times when you're face to face with temptation, like Joseph, and you have to flee and run away from it. But also there's times where, man, we can have safeguards in place and just think of the ways that I'm gonna be tempted. How can I just avoid that altogether?
Right.
Not rely on my own strength because I'm weak. Not rely on my own strength to overcome it, but see how I can avoid it at times. So
Yeah,
that's a big one.
What a great way. Billy Graham would have someone to check his hotel room, would never be in a car with the woman by himself. And oh man, how legalistic and closed-minded, and what a closed-minded guy. Did he not trust himself? No. The fact of the matter is he's walking down a different street.
Right.
Yeah.
And then another practical one. And this is, I think John Piper, he calls this like set specific covenants with yourself. So it's kind of like goal setting, basically, of be realistic with it. So if I'm saying, we'll take like, Bryan, like the Twitter or X or just social media in general as like, that's like a area of stumbling for me, then an unrealistic goal would be, honestly, just if you're being honest, is, you know what? I'm just going to never do that again now. You know what? I'm going to try really hard next time. I'm just going to never do it again.
Right.
Well, you're probably going to do it again, right? Probably going to fall into that. So then if we kind of set a specific goal of, I'm not going to get on social media at all for a week, and then that's going to help start that. Or from now on, I'm going to try and be disciplined with myself in that I only get on social media if there's another person in the room with me or something like that. It's like setting a specific and reasonable goal, and that helps you take steps towards overcoming that.
Yeah, outstanding.
That's great. No, I agree.
Yeah. Any final thoughts?
No, not really, other than, no, I've got none.
I got one more. Bryan said it, and this is,
Let's go.
You already said it earlier. And I think it's worth repeating, is that lots of people trick themselves into thinking, man, I just need to like get by until I get married, and then we're good to go. Lust will no longer be an issue, and all of that will be taken care of. But man, that is a lie straight from the devil, lie straight from the enemy, that, hey, everything's going to be taken care of, because what's going to happen is now you bring something destructive and harmful into the marriage with you.
Right.
So having that be the end goal, especially like working with a lot of young people and stuff, it's not a good marker to aim at.
Yeah, so good, so good. And ultimately, I know, and I think of, I really do try to think of all of our audience that's listening to this. And sometimes our audience, many of them believers, but some of them might be unbelievers, and they're thinking, what a just kind of a puritanical kind of, these guys, I can't believe these guys. So they're hyper conservative. There's no way. Whenever God gives us commandments like this, and to avoid this kind of sin like lust, it's always for our good and His glory, every single time. It's ultimately for our good that this particular act should be confined to marriage between a man and a woman. That's what it should take place. And outside of those, it's always heartache, and there's people that it leads to destruction. Hey, listen, man, we care for you. We're so grateful that you joined us this episode. I'd love to catch you again next time. Hey, if you don't mind, man, again, like, subscribe, buy some coffee, help support us, and we look forward to seeing you next time. God bless.
Peace.